Hi, welcome to another Lawn Fawn video. I'm Kara, and today we're visiting a very special garden under the sea. It's a slimline card, so I'm using the large slimline dies with sliders and the small slimline with lift the flap and slimline stitched hillside borders. I'll also use Oliver's Stitched ABCs, Smooth Sailing, Offset Sayings Birthday, Ocean Shell-fie, Oh Gnome, Happy Village, Some Bunny, You Are Sublime, Crazy Antics, and Ocean Wave Stencils. And I'll use all three of these. So lots of stamp sets, but just a couple of images from each. Well, I'm going to start by ink blending some Distress Oxide with my Ocean Wave stencils, and I'm creating the sky with broken china. And I'm going to move over my stencil, and actually this is another wave stencil because there are three there, and so I'm using another one to create the wave going all the way across. And this is the largest of the stitched rectangle slimline for the slimline design. So I'm starting on my next wave down. So the top was the sky, and now I'm making waves with Faded Jeans Distress Oxide. And I use this painter's tape on the sides, but I will abandon that because it wasn't needed. And the nice thing about those stencils is that there are lines, grid lines that go down, and you can kind of keep it straightened the way you want it all the way across just by following those guidelines. And I'm connecting the waves by finding a curve that just kind of matches up and just ink blending over that. So I'm using these Picket Fence life-changing blender brushes, and they work great with the oxide inks. And now I am going over all of the ocean with Salty Ocean. Seems appropriate, but that kind of blends those waves together and kind of works with the Faded Jeans. And I'm taking the negative part of the stencil to use as the mask to keep my sky the same light blue color. And now I'm doing the inside of the peekaboo part of the card. And so this is cracked pistachio and broken china. And I'm just blending those together, nothing too fancy here, just getting a nice blend between the two of those with the broken china on the bottom and the cracked pistachio on the top. I'll spritz it with a little water and then blot that off, and this is going to create the water effect under the sea. And now I'm doing the same, just blending two colors. This is Worn Lipstick and Ripe Persimmon, and I'm creating kind of a corally base for my under the sea scene, and just kind of blend those together. There will be a lot of images on top of this, so it doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm blotting off, spritzing that and blotting it off as well. So now it's time for all of those little images that we're going to use, and I am inking them up with Lawn Fawn's Jet Black ink and Copic coloring today. And I stamped some of the images twice more, but let's focus on just a few of these images. I have my underwater colors off to the side for inspiration. And then this is a coral that, well, I don't know if it's coral. I think that's coral, but it's a tubular organism under the sea. And it is a Y35. And then I'm coming in with a R05. And then blending those together with a Y38. And then I'm just speckling it a little bit to show kind of a texture on there with the R05. Now the seaweed next to it is going to be purple. Is this kelp? I don't know. It's a variety of underwater plant, and it is RV 63 and 66. And so it's kind of a pinky purple. And I just wanted my underwater plants to be bright and colorful, so that's how we get those. And then for the grassy looking seaweed, it's going to be a YG01, 03, and a 05. And then I have one more plant up there. So this grassy one is from Ocean Shell-fie, and these three up here are from Sublime. And so that's an R05 and blended out with a 02. So I did the rocks, and I'm doing this dirt kind of the same. And so just giving it a base of a C1 and then coming in with my R02 and 05. It's a real kind of orangey red color, so I wanted to keep that to look like the ocean floor. And so now onto that wheelbarrow, and it is going to be a G00, 02, and a 05. I needed to put a little more green into the picture, I thought. So that's why my wheelbarrow is green. And I'm using that G00 just to add a little shine to the bubbles. And onto our octopi. So this guy, I already found my shadows with my lightest BV31. And now I'm coming in with a bit darker, the BV13. And just covering up those shadows again. You know, once I find the shadows, I feel a lot more confident coming out with the darker colors and just going over those areas. So these octopi are, well, they're adorable, first of all, but one way that you can use the stamp set is the guy you see on the left can hold a camera, and then the guy on the right you could put into a photo. So he's taking his selfie, or his shell-fie, as the stamp set indicates, because they're just the underwater version of a selfie. But in this case, we're using both of the guys, and we're using them together as friends in a garden. And right now I'm putting a little violet onto this blue violet guy. So the ends of his arms are just going to be a little different, just to give it a little more interest. And then I'll blend everything back up with my lightest, the BV31, and just blend it all up into his body. Once I have that, I decide it needs to have a little more transition between the 02 and the 31. So I'm using the BV01 to bring in that transition and then blend out from there. And I colored the other octopus just the same way. A little violet to match his tentacles, and decided, I looked at this from a little bit far away and thought, I can go a little darker. So this is the BV17, and I'm just putting it in the very edges of shadow and blending it out with the BV13, and then just kind of, I'll blend the rest of it out so that it's a smooth transition. A little more shine on the bubbles with the BV01, and we're on to the sailboat. It's going to have a red flag, and it's going to be a red ship. And I'm using the R02 and 05 to keep that consistent with the inside. This will be on the outside of the card, and BV trim on the ship, and white sails. So now that I have it all colored, I'm going to cut it out with the coordinating dies for all of these images, and I'll be back in a moment. All right, well, I ran them through the die cut machine and the extra images as well. And now I've got my underwater scene, and this is the lift the flap with the flaps cut off. And I left room on my stitched hillside border piece so that I could move it just where I wanted it, and I decided it needed to go down about 1/4 of an inch, so I'll be cutting about 1/4 inch of that off the bottom. And it's time to arrange everybody. And the nice thing about cutting a template with that lift the flap is I can put it over my scene and know that all of these guys are going to be seen through the windows in the position that I want them. So nobody's, kind of hiding behind a pillar, so to speak, between the two windows. So just arranging everybody, and oh, this is the fun part, right? Just getting them all situated in their garden and putting their garden together. And I don't know, I'd like to be under the sea in an octopus's garden. Oh, yeah, I showed this to my husband. He didn't know what I was talking about. I guess he wasn't a Beatles fan, but oh, I love him anyway. So I'm just going to keep arranging things and decide where I want them to go, and then check from time to time with my lift the flap template to make sure that everything is in a good place. And I'm liking it. So now it's time that I can start gluing things down. And so I'm taking my lawnfawn glue tube and a jewel picker and picking things up. Now you might remember or notice that I did not glue down that coral, the base, yet. So at the end, I will trim that off, that extra 1/4 of an inch, and then glue it together just by lifting up the bottom of it. Okay, well, I'm connecting that fence by just clipping off part of one of it and gluing it together so it looks like it's continuous, and then gluing that on. And then a little surgery on my octopi, because this guy is going to be pushing that wheelbarrow. So I want to put an opening in there so that that wheelbarrow handle will slide under his tentacle there. So he looks like he's holding that. And put a little glue on that and glue it down. I also want to make sure that you see the wheelbarrow. So I'm going to just kind of move it over a little bit so that his whole activity is seen in that one window. And it's time to work on my other octopus. And so I'm going to enlarge that hole for the handle of the watering can and unattach his tentacle there so that he can be, I can hook that handle over his tentacle. And then because he's an octopus, he has many arms to work with, I'm putting that spade or trowel in his other hand. And I'm just going to clip that with the scissors and get that open so that that handle is going to fit right in his little tentacle there. And there he is, ready to garden on both sides. So I'm going to glue him down, and I want to put that template back over everything and just add some more little details coming out from the bottom so it looks like the garden is also in front of us, not just behind the guys there. And then I'll glue the rest of that down. And once I have this garden complete, I took that base and cut off that 1/4 inch, and now I'm putting in a bead of glue just to make sure that sits down and doesn't go anywhere. And now it's on a 3.5 by 8.5 inch note card, and it's time to top it off with the waves. And I cut out the lift the flaps with that die, and now I'm going to make sure that those flaps come up easily and don't bend the rest of the paper. So I'm taking a bone folder and creasing those score lines just to make sure that they're nice and crisp. And now we can put on our 3 ships. So I'm going to cut a slit between the ship and the sail, and that's where our letters are going to hang out. So I want to have room to tuck them in, and I'll cut all of the ships the same way and just kind of round the corners a little bit. And I'm using shimmer cardstock in gemstone and Oliver's stitched ABCs to create the sentiment And so it's going to say, I'd like to be, and then inside it's going to say, with you, in each of the flaps, so that this sentiment makes sense whether you know the song or not. And so I've got I'd like in the ships, and like is kind of crowded in that ship, but for the third ship, to be seemed a bit crowded as well. So I just want to put be in there, and it kind of balances out with the I'd. And so what to do with the to? Well, I decided I would use Offset Sane's birthday and put that to just floating there in the sea. And I'll stamp that in Faded Jeans Distress Oxide. And then we have our sentiment without being too crowded in the boat. So there it is, all set to go. And now it's time to glue those letters into the ship. So I'm taking my glue tube and just gluing those down to the sails. And I want to make sure that those boats are fully on the flap when I adhere those down, so that they don't get bent at the crease when you open the flap. So now I'm going to take that octopus garden scene and adhere it to my note card. And now I want to put down the sentiments. And this with you comes from Crazy Antics. So I'm putting it on the wheelbarrow and on the garden box, and then over in the water next to the other octopus. And then in order for this to stay secure when the flaps are being raised, I'm going to use this double-sided tape on the ocean scene that's going to go on top. Take off the release paper and then very carefully put it on top of my underwater garden scene. So I actually put it upside down so that it would be flat. The top is flat on my work surface, and that way I know I have it even all the way across. And there it is. It's all set. I'd like to be with you under the sea in an octopus's garden in the shade. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you're inspired to make a slimline lift the flap card for yourself. Thanks for watching and have a great day. Bye.